If you think Washington is going to wake up one morning, open a laptop, and simply erase America's debt, you are thinking like a child looking for a magic trick. That is not how debt gets canceled. Debt gets canceled the way ice melts quietly, gradually, then all at once in your real life. That is what most people still do not understand. They keep staring at the headline number and asking the wrong question: can America pay it back? Will the new Fed chair slash rates? Will the bond market revolt? Will Congress do something dramatic? All of those are interesting. None of them are the main event. The main event is much simpler. When a government carries too much debt to grow out of it, too much debt to tax its way out of it, and too much debt to cut its way out of it, it does not cancel the number. It cancels the value of the unit that debt is measured in. That is the first mechanism. I call it the battery drain. A dollar is like a battery. The shape stays the same, the label stays the same, the number stays the same, but the charge inside it. The purchasing power can be drained away year after year until the battery still exists, but does far less work. That is inflation in its most useful political form. Nobody has to vote on it as an explicit debt cancellation plan. Nobody has to stand at a podium and admit what is being done. Nobody has to say the words haircut or default. They just let the battery leak. And if the government owes tens of trillions in those same batteries, then every year the battery weakens, the real burden of the debt weakens with it. That is how debt dies in public without looking like it died. The second mechanism is what makes this so dangerous for ordinary people. I call it the saver tax. Most people still think cash is safety. It is not. Cash is liquidity. Those are not the same thing. Liquidity helps you survive surprise. Safety protects purchasing power. And if inflation runs above what your savings account, your CD, or your short duration fixed income holdings are paying you, then your cash is not sitting safely. It is being harvested slowly, silently, without a statement ever saying what actually happened. That is why so many people get blindsided in these environments. They see the same number in their account and assume the money is still doing the same amount of work. It is not. The account balance becomes a sedative. It calms you while it weakens you. I have watched people spend their whole lives building a cash cushion, finally reach the point where they feel secure, and then lose real ground for years because they never learned to measure wealth in purchasing power instead of nominal dollars. That is a brutal mistake, and it becomes even more brutal when the entire structure of policy begins pushing in that direction. You do not need a secret memo to understand this. You only need arithmetic. The federal debt is enormous. The interest burden alone is becoming large enough to squeeze everything else in the budget. Raising taxes enough to solve it is politically poisonous. Cutting benefits enough to solve it is politically poisonous. Growing fast enough to solve it would require a level of economic acceleration that serious people do not project. So what is left? Financial repression. That phrase sounds academic. It is not. It simply means this: keep the return on safe savings and fixed claims below the rate at which money is being diluted, and let time do the dirty work. That is the third mechanism. I call it the slow confiscation. People hear the word confiscation and imagine police, court orders, and frozen accounts. The cleaner version is inflation running hotter than the yield on the assets. Ordinary people think are safe. The saver never sees a seizure. The saver sees a statement. The saver sees interest paid. The saver feels responsible, and meanwhile the real value drains. That is why these periods are so powerful for governments and so cruel for the unprepared. The transfer is quiet enough that most people call it normal. Now here is where I want to separate fantasy from structure. No single Fed chair is a king. No one person can snap his fingers and dictate every result. No one clean date on a calendar determines the entire future. That is how amateurs think. I am not interested in amateur thinking. I am interested in direction. Direction is what matters. And the direction is clear enough. The debt burden is too large. The system will lean toward policies that ease the real burden of debt over time, and those policies almost always favor owners over savers. That sentence matters more than all the noise. Owners over savers, say it again. Owners over savers. If you own productive assets, inflation can work for you. If you own pricing power, inflation can work for you. If you own scarce real things, inflation can work for you. If you owe long-term fixed-rate debt against good assets, inflation can even become your helper. But if you are a pure saver, if you are the person holding idle cash, long-duration bonds, and fixed claims that never reprice fast enough, then you are the fuel. That is the fourth mechanism. I call it the owner switch. Most people never consciously make this switch. They work, they save, they collect dollars, they call themselves prudent. They think of ownership as optional and saving as noble. Then one day they wake up and realize the people who own productive things have been moving ahead while they were protecting a pile that kept getting smaller in real terms. The system loves when you stay a saver. The system gets nervous when you become an owner. A saver lends stability to the system. An owner extracts upside from it. That is why I have always preferred owning businesses to owning promises. A business with genuine pricing power can adjust. It can raise prices. It can protect margins. It can keep real earnings alive while the currency weakens. A long bond cannot do that. A savings account cannot do that. A certificate of deposit cannot do that. They sit there politely while time takes bites out of them. Now, I want to be very careful here because this is where a lot of people become stupid in the opposite direction. Once they understand the saver tax, they sprint into concentration. Gold only, real estate only, tech only, crypto only, one story, one asset class, one emotional thesis. That is not intelligence. That is panic wearing a thesis. The fifth mechanism is the concentration trap. Every repression cycle rewards a certain set of assets. Yes, but it never rewards blind faith. If you bet your entire future on one expression of the thesis, you have not protected yourself. You have simply traded one vulnerability for another. The right answer is broader and colder than that. You want ownership across multiple kinds of assets that can survive and reprice in different ways. High-quality equities with pricing power, real assets with genuine scarcity, productive real estate bought at sane prices, especially if financed with long-term fixed-rate debt. Selective exposure to hard stores of value that cannot be printed into existence. And enough liquidity to live without being forced into bad decisions. That is a system, that is not a slogan. The sixth mechanism is what most people still miss even after they understand inflation. I call it the fixed-rate gift. In a repression environment, a fixed-rate liability becomes a very strange animal. Most debt is dangerous because the borrower owes a contract and hopes the future is kind enough to let him service it. But when the debt is long-term fixed rate and attached to a durable asset, and when inflation slowly weakens the currency used to repay it, the burden can shrink in real terms year after year. That does not mean all debt is good. That is foolish thinking. Bad debt is still bad debt. A truck loan tied to an ego purchase is still stupid. A credit card balance funding consumption is still poison, but a properly structured fixed-rate mortgage on a good property is a different conversation entirely. In that case, inflation can wind up paying part of the bill for you by reducing the real weight of the future payments. That is why people who rush to pay off every last cheap fixed-rate mortgage in an inflationary world often do not realize what they're giving back. They are handing the bank stronger dollars today when time might have allowed them to repay with weaker dollars later. That is not always the wrong move, but it is often done without understanding the trade-off. And money punishes people who act without understanding the trade-off. So what do you actually do if you accept the direction of travel and stop pretending cash is a fortress? You build a protocol. That is the seventh mechanism. I call it the purchasing power protocol. Step 1. Stop measuring your financial life in account balances. Measure it in what the money can still buy. If your balance grew 4% while the real cost of life around you rose faster, you did not preserve wealth. You lost it politely. Step 2. Move away from excess cash beyond your true operating reserve. I am not telling you to become reckless. I am telling you to stop confusing comfort with safety. Keep enough liquid capital to survive, to think clearly, to avoid forced selling, to sleep at night. Beyond that, every extra idle dollar needs a job in an asset class with a chance of outrunning debasement. Step 3. Favor ownership with repricing ability. Businesses that can raise prices, assets whose scarcity survives policy structures where time and inflation work with you rather than against you. Step 4. Avoid the dead zones. Long-duration fixed claims that cannot keep up. Excess concentration in one story. Lifestyle structures built on the assumption that stable purchasing power will always return. It may not return on your preferred timeline. Step 5. Think in real return, not nominal yield. This single mental shift separates people who understand the environment from people who are still being managed by it. If your asset yields 5% and inflation is running hotter than that over time, your result is not 5%. Your result is loss with paperwork attached. And the last step is the identity flip. Stop being the person the system is played on. Become the person who understands where the pressure is going and positions before the crowd gets the language for what already happened. That is really the whole game. You will notice I have not told you to predict exact rates. I have not told you to worship a calendar date. I have not told you to believe every viral claim attached to one public figure. That is because grown investors do not build their future around a single headline personality. They build around structural necessity. And the structural necessity here is clear. The debt burden is too large. The purchasing power of the currency is too convenient a release valve. And the people who hold only dollars and promises denominated in dollars are the ones standing directly under the leak. There's one more thing you need to hear. Doing nothing is not neutral. People say, I will wait and see. Number you are already seeing. And waiting is already a position. Holding too much cash is a position. Holding long-duration fixed claims is a position. Refusing to own real assets is a position. Every day you delay, the battery keeps draining. That is what makes these environments so cruel. The price of confusion is not paid in one dramatic moment. It is paid continuously by people who still think they are being careful. Careful is not the same thing as correct. That distinction decides fortune, so let me leave you with a judgment that matters. America's debt will not be canceled with a keystroke. It will be softened through the currency. That is the path of least resistance. And when that happens, the people who cling to nominal safety will get weaker, while the people who own productive scarce. Repricing assets will discover that the same policy current which drained savers quietly carried owners forward. That is the truth. Not comforting, not theatrical, useful. And usefulness is what matters when the machine starts moving against people who still think standing still is safe.